Hello, welcome to the Rob and Bay channel, the channel where my wife and I upload whatever videos we feel like uploading. And today I'm going to talk about the process of me starting my life over, not once, but twice. So the first time that I started my life over, I was 30 years old and I had been a monk for almost 10 years. And before I actually left the monastery to enter the regular world again, I had an incredible amount of anxiety, not knowing how things were going to go for me, where I was going to find a job, just how things were going to work out in general, like to the point that I was hardly sleeping for about a week, and I would eat just like a few bites of food a day. Like, I was super anxious. And I think for a lot of people who are either about to have to start over again for whatever reason in life or considering doing so, that's probably relatable. So the first time, the time that I left the monastery, as well as the second time, really, I did find myself in kind of a good situation because I was able to go stay with my mom. This is the first time back in Maryland. So I had been living in California, went back to Maryland to stay with my mom. The situation was pretty okay. And my thinking was that I would just take absolutely any job I could find and then go from there. So my first job was as a caretaker at a senior living place, working with people who had Alzheimer's and dementia. And that was a terrible job, and it did not pay well. And it really tested me mentally, for sure. And then kind of piling onto this is the reality that we find ourselves in now in the United States. So if you're watching this in the United States and you're in a position of having to start over again in life and you don't have the benefit of like a college degree that can land you a good job, then you know that the living situation can be difficult. And when I was growing up, it was kind of expected that anyone working a full-time job could afford a one-bedroom apartment for the most part. And now that's just not the case. If you're going to afford a one-bedroom apartment by yourself, you have to be making quite a lot of money. And if you don't have a college degree, a useful college degree, or you aren't pretty reasonably far along, like in a trade or something, then you aren't going to be able to afford an apartment by yourself. And that caused me a lot of maybe anger, I would say. Like, I was just angry that I wasn't able to afford to live by myself, basically. And I had decided pretty early on, the first time I left the monastery, that I wanted to go back to the monastery and ordain again. Perhaps this contributed to it, just seeing the state of the world. Maybe that made me want to go back. But there was some bitterness there, and I knew that that didn't help me at all. Feeling embittered about how things were wasn't going to help me. It didn't help me. And I did have to work through that. But just working and then always looking to try to move up into a better job didn't help me, I would say. Just helping build up like self-confidence, like if I wanted to continue in the world, I could do this, I could handle this. So I started out in that kind of awful job as a caretaker, and then I got out of that as soon as I could find another job. Basically, once I realized after a few months I wanted nothing more to do with this. So I worked as a pharmacy tech for a short time, and then realized that that was a pretty awful position as well, for me anyway. And then I ended up working for Sherwin-Williams, and I actually really enjoyed that job. In Maryland, it wasn't required that you speak Spanish, and so I was able to find a job there, and really enjoyed it. If I had wanted to stick around, I would have probably moved up into like a managerial position or like a sales position, and I could have been happy doing that. But once I felt kind of stable and secure, I had already bought a car shortly after going back to Maryland, because you need a car to get around. Again, my situation was pretty good because my mom was like semi-retired at the time, so I was able to use her car for the first couple months to get to and from work. And then I got my own car, which I paid off after only a year. So when I was starting over this first time, my position was perhaps better than some people in that I could at least go and stay with my mom. I had family to stay with, so I didn't really have to worry about rent. It was just working and saving money. But because I wanted to go back to the monastery, I felt like I wasn't really fully starting over in life, maybe, because I didn't really have any intention of continuing with it. So I went back to this monastery that I had been a monk at, wanting to ordain, and after a short time realized I didn't want to ordain again. But this time I wanted to stay in California. And again, things just conspired, and I found a pretty good situation where some friends happened to have a small spare bedroom in their house for me to stay in while I tried to get something going in California. But again, I felt a lot of anxiety because this time I couldn't stay with them indefinitely. So I knew I had to find a place, and I had to try to find a job and get a car and get everything going without already having like a long-term place to stay lined up. And that weighed on me immensely. But I knew from the first time I just had to man up and do it. So I did, and I was able to find a job after about a month and a half, which was actually quite a bit longer than it had taken me previously to find jobs when I was in Maryland. So that was anxiety inducing. And I did get another car after just like a couple months of being out of the monastery and staying in a friend's house and working. Got my second car, which again I paid off in less than a year this time. And again, my process for finding jobs was that I was just going to accept anything I could, although because I was in California, my sort of minimum threshold for pay was $20, because if you take anything less than that in California, you're going to have a really hard time getting by, even if you're just renting a room in someone's house. So I took the first job offer that came along because I couldn't work at Sherwin-Williams. I actually really wanted to work at Sherwin-Williams in California, but you can't do that if you don't speak Spanish. So I ended up working at this shop that repairs power washers, and didn't really love it. And because I took it upon myself to do something that I found uncomfortable, and that is I went out and tried to build up kind of like a social circle around me. Like I was willing to go out and hang out with people and talk to people. I'm normally very introverted, so that's not something that comes naturally to me. And I met someone who is very nice, and she would go hiking with a group of people, and so I tagged along for that. And then I met someone, found out that he works at a company, and I just asked him if he had a job available, and as it so happened, he did. And so after working at this power washing shop for just like a month and a half or so, maybe 2 months, then I left that and went to work at this other company, which I really enjoy, I like. And that wouldn't have happened if I had not have had a circle of friends around me. All of this to say, if you're someone who's starting out in life again, then if you don't already have a circle of people around you, a social group, then you really should consider putting yourself out there more. Think like anything you can do to meet new people. The larger the group, the better, really. If you're like a religious person, then go to church or whatever. Go to a monastery if you're a Buddhist like me, or hiking groups, or like board gaming groups, groups that meet up in person. You'll find that that can be a great source of support and perhaps even a way to find a job, as was my case. And again, during this second round of starting over, but starting over for real in California, I just had to accept that I was probably not going to be able to afford an apartment, like even a studio, by myself unless I just gave up all of my money. So I just had to accept that I was going to be renting a room in someone's house, and that I just had to find, the most reasonably priced room that I could, best situation that I could. And that did not necessarily come easy. The first room that I found, I thought the situation would be good, but on my first night there, the people who lived in this house apparently really like to sing karaoke very loudly, and they like to drink on certain occasions very loudly, and they have people coming over at all hours of the night, talking and chatting. And so I was there for one night before I asked my friends if I could come back and stay with them for a short time. And fortunately, these friends knew an older couple who had a spare bedroom that they sometimes rented out. Again, this is where having people around you, friends, a social circle, can really help you out. And that room situation was better. Not ideal, but like livable. I could have stayed there for a reasonably long time if other things hadn't have happened in my life. An aspect which I had some difficulty adjusting to is having to take full responsibility for myself now. Because when I was back in Maryland staying with my mom, I would give her like a pretty large amount of money every month because I didn't really need it. And so she pretty much handled the shopping because she wanted to buy the stuff she wanted to buy. There's no point in both of us going. So I pretty much just eat whatever she brought in, and I didn't really eat that much because I didn't want to use up money that I'd given her, basically. So I didn't really have to think a whole lot about cooking. My bills were pretty minimal, like I didn't have to pay utility bills or anything. But then starting over in California, suddenly I have to actually go out to grocery stores and buy all of my own food, and then cook it all myself, because back in Maryland, my mom was semi-retired, so she was home during the day, and she would just cook dinner for herself, and then I would just eat that as well. So having to cook for myself was a bit of an adjustment, and then eventually having like all these utility bills and stuff to pay. Adulting basically isn't very fun, but it's one of those things that you just get used to, and then it becomes ho-hum and you don't think about it. So if you have any anxiety about that stuff, I would say don't worry about it too much. Just jump in feet first, and you just adjust to it, and then it just becomes normal, second nature. You don't think that much about it. It doesn't stress you out that much, hopefully. It doesn't stress me out anymore so much. And one of the best parts of starting over in life for me was meeting my wife, Bay, who is the other half of this channel. And I met her because of, well, it comes back to this social circle thing again, having friends, knowing people. Through a friend, I was asked to give Bay, my wife, a drive up to the monastery where she wanted to visit from Thailand. And that's how I met her, which I was not expecting, because even though I wanted to have a relationship, I thought it would be a long time before I was secure and stable enough to date anyone, but things just conspired. So even though you might be anxious about starting over, there might be some fear of the unknown. In that unknown, there can still be some really great things for you that you are not expecting. When it comes to getting into a relationship, I did end up getting into one pretty quickly and went forward with it quickly, but that's because, in my opinion, I kind of found like the ideal person. She's like very ethical. She's not someone who brings like baggage, and if you're someone who's starting over in life, you definitely don't want to get involved with someone who has their own baggage, who could sort of make your life even harder than it already is. And so I would advise to not rush into any relationships. And if you do meet someone, as I did, who you like, then I would advise to really take a good hard look at them and consider whether or not this is like a genuinely good person who can help you in your own life, and if you have anything of value to add to their life, because a relationship is kind of a double-edged sword. It can either end up being something really good, or, as is often the case, it can be something really bad. So be careful, and I think probably focus more on just getting your house in order before trying to bring someone else into your house. And also, in the spirit of stepping out of my comfort zone, like sort of in the same vein of going out and expanding my social circles, part of this is having this YouTube channel, which was kind of the idea of my wife. She was really into it, and it's normally not the sort of thing that I would be into, putting my face out on YouTube for a lot of strangers to see and perhaps criticize. But it has been helpful for me, actually. Being able to sit in front of a camera like this definitely makes me more comfortable out in public. Probably makes me more confident at work, being able to speak up. So I'm not saying that, if you're starting out and you're dealing with like anxiety, maybe you're like so introverted, like it's difficult for you that you have to do a YouTube channel, but challenging yourself in certain ways can be good. For me, it was this YouTube channel. And so now, about a year and a half of starting over again for the second time, things progressed very quickly for me, actually. Between meeting my wife like pretty shortly after leaving the monastery for the second time, and then getting a good job, and then ending up in an apartment. Hey, my own apartment. Only a year and a half has passed, and my life is quite good, I would say. I have money that I can spend on hobbies. Like, I enjoy playing video games, so I bought myself a computer, and now I'm getting into Warhammer 40,000. I don't have so much money that I can afford the little miniature army dudes, because I'm not that rich, but I really like the books. So hobbies are something that can really bring a lot of joy to your life. And even if I were still like single or in like a room in someone's house, I feel like just having a job to work, having a car, being able to pay my bills without going into any debts, and then just having some hobbies, like just that would be enough for me to be happy, I think. So when you're starting over in life, I think it would behoove one, to not set your expectations so high, like not that you can't have goals. I mean, definitely have goals. I mean, like if you want to have, like, buy your own house or something and have a nice job, sure, work towards it. If that's sort of running you ragged or making you miserable, then maybe reconsider what is actually necessary for you to be happy. And don't go chasing after what you see other people attaining to possibly make them happy. Just consider what you actually need to be happy, because I think you'll find that it's actually not all that much. So I don't have a huge amount of practical information for someone who's starting over in life, but I just wanted to make this video as, like, encouragement from someone who had to start over to those who are starting over, who are thinking of starting over, that it is possible. You can be happy, and just go for it. I mentioned that I was getting into Warhammer 40,000, and if you'd like to hear more about that, please comment below. And whether you want to hear about it or not, I'm going to be making a video about it shortly. So please like and subscribe, and tune in for future videos from me and my wife. Bye. Bye-bye.